Welcome, everybody. Musicians Peer Support Special Sync Session with Liz Rogers. Everybody give it up for Liz Rogers for the camera. Big round of applause. Liz, how are you? Thank you so much for being here.
Hey, I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Of course, you're a force in the sync world, in my opinion. You have a lot going on, like the National Film Festival, but you also work at Anacrusis. You do a lot. I think it looks like you do a lot. So I can't wait to talk about your day to day and what your work life looks like. But first, I'd love to hear a little bit about where you're from, where you grew up.
Well, I've been here in Nashville for over 15 years, so this is home now for sure. Been here longer than I've lived anywhere else. So, I grew up overseas and then spent some time on the East Coast and then made my way here. So,
Very cool.
definitely, Nashville is where I feel at home and where I feel like is home for the foreseeable future. So yeah.
Yeah. Did you always have a love for all things music when you were growing up?
I did. Yeah. I actually grew up very in the performance side of things. And in primarily musical theater. So I was like performing in a professional company from a young age and always kind of thought that I would be working in the musical theater world in a behind the scenes role, either directing or casting or things like something on that. And kind of transition from musical theater to musical theater movies and musical theater television in that context, and saw my career going in that direction. And then it kind of came back around to like the songwriters and the talent who are writing the songs that are then ending up there. So, yeah.
Wow, very cool. So I dabbled in musical theater. That world is really fulfilling and I think enriching because of how the cast works together and the
Yeah,
crew works together. You probably use some of those skills that you learned early in your job now, huh?
definitely. Yeah, I think there's so much that goes into a production on all levels, from either a musical level or a film or television show, ad agencies. There's so much that we see that happens behind the scenes that the end product doesn't show. But yeah, just so many moving parts and so much work from so many people, which is really cool.
And the story with the music, that line of thinking is kind of a common thread there, that there's a story that has an essence and all the music supports the little ins and outs of the story, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Music is helping to convey the visual. You are I see music as a character. So the music is a character just as much in a TV show as the actors that you see. It's helping set the tone and the emotion. And there's so much that goes into music helping to convey and share the story, really.
And I know our audience, our members have some questions. So you're okay with taking questions, right, Liz?
Sure. Do we want to do
Okay.
that right away or?
No, just putting it out there. So just
Yeah,
get
of
everybody
course.
get your questions ready. You can type them in the chat. I'll moderate that, or you can raise your hand in Zoom. That's fine too. So I know that people are eager to learn about sync. So I guess we'll dig in a little bit here because we're talking about story and music. And I agree that the music is a character, and to really um, um, acknowledge how integrated they are is helpful to me as a writer. So as writers, what can we do to keep that in mind? Of course, we talk about being genuine and writing what we know to be our own expression, but is there something about story and narrative that we can keep in mind when we're writing?
Yeah, I think a common misconception with music that ends up in picture, I don't want to even call that sync music because that's a pretty big,
Yeah, I
wide
like to call it
misconception.
the four-letter word right now.
But music that ends up to picture, there's a big misconception that it needs to be vague, and not tell a story. And I think, in my experience, that couldn't be further from the truth. It needs to tell a story just through emotion, not through specific items in the room in the moment. So the story, the arc that you felt that as you lived that story, or if you're putting yourself in a hypothetical story to write a song, the way that that makes you feel is exactly what needs to be conveyed. And so the song, the end result needs to make the listener feel something. It can make me want to cry, laugh, dance, get it. Like, it has to make me feel something. And I think that that doesn't come from vague songs. It comes from deep hearted songs that come from a real place. And I often use the word authenticity. I think a lot of people really have been gravitating toward that word because it's so true. We can feel if something is authentic. If you're talking to someone and they're telling you a story that happened to them, it moves you because it's authentic, and that's what songs can do as well. And I think people who write for sync tend to lose that perspective because they're chasing a very narrow vision, and they're forgetting that at the end of the day, the songs that you Shazam because it moved you, or that you went back and looked it up because it moved you, are really probably not the ones that were written to a brief. They were probably written from a real life story or from a
Right.
heart, place. So
Yeah, that's really well said. Gosh, thank you, Liz. You talk about misconceptions, and I've noticed some, but I want to hear from the best of the best here. What are some of the common misconceptions? And I'm hesitant to use that word sync as well, because it's really kind of been manipulated, in my opinion. So, let's just talk about music and TV, film, ads, music to picture. What are some of those common misconceptions that you see coming through where you're like, yeah, gosh, how come I keep hearing this? That's just not true.
yeah, I mean, the idea that something needs to be vague is kind of a big one. I think there are a lot of specific references that are chased after and not chased after correctly, or not really understood what it is about the reference, whether that's an artist or a song or someone who has been getting a lot of placements. What it is that that artist is doing well may be deeper than what you're just copying on a like sound alike level. And so I think just chasing after something that you look at and see is like getting a lot of placements may not be the best approach unless you're really digging into like how or why that is working for that artist or that writer. So I think writing to a brief often can definitely have its ups and downs in terms of what the end result is. I think assignment writing is a great task in and of itself as an assignment, but you have to think it is just an assignment. So you can't just do that. You have that in mind. Maybe read a brief and write to that brief, and then read that same brief the next day or the next time you're in a session, and just pull out like a couple keywords and channel the energy from those keywords and create a story that is true and resonates with you and your co-writers, but keeping those lyrical themes in mind, or keeping like a sonic palette in mind. I think there are a lot of different ways to write something that can work really well in picture.
Yeah, learning how to use those references. Wow. And so I'm sure you get this question a lot, but I get it too. So let's just ask it for people who are probably wondering. We do have members here that are in the room, and maybe if we have replays available, we'll be watching the replay, that do not know anything about this infamous word of sync, music licensing, music publishing, but they know that they want their music to end up to some kind of picture, TV, film, ads. They just don't know the first thing on how to go about doing that. What would you say to them?
Well, I think first trying to give yourself some perspective of what your music sounds like from an unbiased place. I think artists and writers and creatives tend to get really in their heads about their own projects. And so trying to step back, whether that's just some time apart from the project or as you're thinking about releasing it, just really looking at it from an external perspective and saying, hey, what does this sound like? What does this really, who are the similar artists? And everyone wants to be their own unique person, but it really is helpful to say, hey, this is really the box that it does fit in, as much as we try to say my music doesn't fit in a box. And I really respect that. But at the end of the day, it also serves the greater audience to say, it is pop or it is rock and it fits in these lanes. And here's what it kind of, where it would sound on a Spotify playlist, what it would fit in well with, and what shows it might fit in well with. And sometimes the answer may be, it's really niche and it probably wouldn't resonate with a specific genre of TV show or movie, but maybe it'd be great for like a really quirky ad or something that's really, has this unique demographic. And looking at websites like TuneFind for television or film, iSpot for advertising. There are so many resources out there just to kind of, before you even reach out on behalf of your music, really giving yourself the assessment of, if this wasn't my music, like if I were just listening to this as an outside viewer or consumer, could I hear it? Could it work? Does it sound like an artist that is getting placements? Does it sound like someone that is on Spotify? Is the production up to par? Is how am I really comparing on a level? And if you feel like it is really landing and you have some other people that are kind of speaking that into you, then I think the next step would be to start sending that out to companies that represent music, that, third-party companies that can help advocate for your music on your behalf to the client that is the end goal. So that would be kind of the first path.
Really great. Wow, that's a lot of really great information. When we're looking for those representatives, of course, vetting research is number one. Any kind of tips on how we do that? How do we make sure that this is a reputable place to be submitting music to?
Well, I'll answer the first half first. So I think the research that you hopefully have done before you reach out to those companies will show through in your initial reach out to say, hey, my music sounds like these other artists and they have been, their music is being used in these shows or these ads. I feel like my music could fit in this similar vein, and could be really, good in the, whatever this context is, whether it's advertising or television. And I think having an articulate email that shows that both yourself, the music that you're making, and also the industry and how that could then fit in is going to be really helpful in an initial cold email, because we get so many emails a day that are just like, hey, I wanted to send you my music. And that it's just really hard to know even where to begin or how to filter through that. And, we have a system, as I'm sure most companies do, of kind of where those then go and where the submissions get listened to and how they get cataloged. And, but it's really challenging. So having any kind of context in your email as to like, hey, I heard about you through this friend or this artist that I really love. You work with this artist and I love their music and I think my music is similar to their music. And, that sounds like it could maybe fit on your roster. Like they're having some context of why you reached out to the company that you reached out to, is really helpful. Now, as far as how to know if that company is reputable, I mean, I would say just try to do your homework as best as you can. There are more and more licensing companies starting every day. And so it's sometimes hard to know if that company has built up the relationships that will help get your music to the next level.
Right.
Maybe checking some social media, some stats on their artists. If you go to their website and they have artists listed, then go to TuneFind and type in those artists and see if those artists have placements.
Right.
Try to do a little digging from either Spotify or Instagram or just kind of cross-platform, corroboration, I guess would be the word,
Yes.
to just assess. And of course, you can also always look up, even Instagram or whatever has the feature now of like when an account was started.
Oh, nice.
So, or, you can look up on a website, like when was this website started? If it was this year, I would just be a little weary of, trusting this year or last year's, it's a brand new company. Unless you look up who their CEO or their founder is, and it's someone who has an immense sync history. Like it's not to say that a new company can't be widely successful, because there's a new company that just started here in town, and it's from an incredibly successful veteran of this industry for like 20 plus years, has now gone off and started a new company. And so it's already succeeding. And so the fact that it's new doesn't necessarily mean that they can't have traction.
Right.
But yeah, it's a little hard sometimes with a lot of new companies that are very digital, like very like online based, where you submit your songs online, you don't ever meet with someone in person. So yeah, try your best to just get a meeting with someone, talk to someone, really gauge their energy in person or at least over Zoom, and go from there.
Such great advice. Wow. Dropping gems, as they say. There are a couple questions here in the chat, Liz. I hope you don't mind. I'm going to get to a couple of these questions here. One is about metadata. What is your most common metadata search? Style, mood, key, BPM, etc. Do you have one? Do you have a common metadata search?
It depends on the media. There are definitely a lot of keywords that come up a lot. Things like bombastic or anthemic, words that I feel like sometimes can be overused, or just misinterpreted. But in terms of BPM, yeah, I mean, it's so much of that varies.
Yeah.
Like an ad is going to be so different than an emotional montage scene in a TV show.
Right.
And, anyone can visually hear that difference. Something that is big and punchy and trying to sell you a product is not going to be the same keywords or, tone of something that is like heart-wrenching and moving.
Yes.
So it totally depends on, like, if we're looking at ads, sure, yeah, I feel like we do often get a BPM that is 120 to 140-ish, something that's like fast paced, something that has energy, something that they can cut to. Keywords there definitely might be like feel good or bombastic, or you want something that can jump from moment to moment. If there's someone dancing, or if there's someone walking, or if there's someone shopping, or whatever it is that is conveyed, that it feels good and makes you also, as you get up to walk away from your TV, you turn back to look at it during the commercial break. So they want something that is going to pull you in, but very different for film or television. Trailers also have a whole different tone. Something that is going to be as epic and as massive as a trailer probably won't even lend itself well to film or television. It depends. But yeah, so there's a lot of different keywords. I actually wrote an article for American Songwriter, and I specifically broke down the most common keywords that I see on a daily basis, and actually what those sound like and look like, and
yes,
how
it's a fantastic article that's posted in our event page, everybody. I made sure everybody has that article prior to this, so if you haven't checked that article out, please check it out. It's a huge wealth of information as artists. And Liz, on this topic, I hear a lot of, sync has to be this, sync has to, well, for sync, and it's kind of like, you tell me, but in my experience in all this stuff, anything goes. You're talking about music to picture. So that runs the gamut. So you can't tell me this isn't good for sync, because what are you syncing? What are you talking about? We don't even know what we're talking about here.
Exactly. Especially if you're talking to a company that is representing music for all mediums. Like we work with advertising, film, television, trailer, video game, sports. We work in like so many different contexts that it's rare that something doesn't work like right off the bat. There are production elements, there are specific lyrics if you have things that like really lend to a really specific story, that make it more challenging, but that doesn't, still doesn't necessarily mean that it could never land. Like I can't say that it could never land a spot. So all that I can say is it's probably not right for our roster at this time. And, or we don't see enough opportunities coming into us that we would feel comfortable signing it. And I would hope that any company would be honest with you about that. If they don't get enough opportunities from their clients coming in that would be right for your music, then they shouldn't be taking it on. And so many companies have different niches and lanes and specific things that they do well and do best. And maybe it's not the right fit for that company. And that's where you just kind of find someone else that's excited to champion what you're doing.
Right. Thank you. And that meditative question was from Q. This next one is from Jamie Lee. What's your favorite or most moving project you've worked on, and why was it so special to you? I mean, it's hard to pick favorites, so we could say favorite today.
We had a recent one that was really fun, a big placement that happened last fall. So I guess not super recent, a year ago, but we do quarterly songwriting retreats where we'll bring in our songwriters and music supervisors. And so the supervisors from the brand or the film will be here with our writers. And so we had the supervisor for a specific brand. And on Monday, it was a Monday to Friday. On Monday morning at breakfast, we were all talking about like different projects and upcoming campaigns. And she was like, yeah, we're working on this very specific campaign. We want it to be really fun and danceable. The target demographic is like a TikTok dance challenge. And that's kind of what the client is leaning toward right now. We want something that is quick and poppy and that we can make a catchy dance to. We already have a choreographer who's a really well-known choreographer on board to like choreograph for it. And they wrote a song that day. And by lunchtime, she was like, this is the song, like, this is the song of the campaign. And sent it over to the client by 8 p.m. when they had kind of finished out like a mix of everything. And by Thursday, it was already being choreographed. And by the following Monday, we already had videos of the dancers dancing to it.
Wow.
So it was a really fast moving spot, but it was really exciting to see the energy of the supervisor being there with the writers, conveying really clear messaging. Sometimes even a brief can't convey the nuances of what could work. And then seeing the song kind of come to life out of that, and day of, like, having the client hear it and get excited about it. And just a couple of days later, knowing that it was already in the works. And then, yeah, by the following week, it was licensed and, out worldwide.
Amazing. Wow. What a fantastic opportunity for those writers. And it goes back to that kind of musical theater thing of like people working together. It's like there's this chemistry that happens when the vibe is right, that you can really get some amazing art and creativity done and get some things moving. So thank you for that, for sharing that story. We have a couple more questions. Stu, I see your question there, but I need a European translator. I don't know what a bugbear. I'm going to ask Liz that question, but I want to know what it is before I ask. Do you know what a bugbear?
It's in the chat, Rachel.
It's in the chat. It's in the chat. Okay, gotcha. Stu has a question here, so we'll go to Stu first, then Joe. Stu's calling in from Scotland. Stu says, "What's your biggest bugbear when being pitched music?" And what'd you say it was, Stu? What's a bugbear?
Just something that's frustrating.
Something in a noise. Okay.
I don't know. INC.
Okay, gotcha. What's your biggest bugbear?
When people attach files.
Of course, yes.
I always ask for a link, and I sometimes will specifically say, please send me a streaming link.
Yes.
and I'll still get an attachment. So a link that I can stream music from, and ideally, if I like it, have an option to download or save it or something is great, but mostly that I don't need to download it in order to listen to it. And yeah, I think that's probably the biggest thing. Is even our own writers do it all the time. And I'm like, just send a link, please. Like, I just have so much in my inbox. I'm constantly deleting. So yeah.
Yes. Okay. That's
helpful.
good. That's a really great answer. So everybody, please, that's just in general. I mean, that's like, that's across the board. I mean, to me too, like with the exception of our diamond people, our Patreon community, like, please don't send me attachments either. Okay. Now I know what a bugbear is. Joe Hogan from Australia. You have a question for Liz?
I do. Hi, Liz, and hi, Rachel. Liz, a great article, actually. I really enjoyed reading your article, and Rachel, thank you for posting it. Liz, I noticed that you're on the music committee for the Nashville Film Festival. I love film festivals.
Hey, Joe, we were about to talk about that. I'm excited.
Okay,
I can't go this year, but I really want to go next year. You have a question about it, or you want to hear more about it?
Well, two things. Yeah, well, two things is as a producer, I sort of really love hanging out in the film festival world, and here in Australia, you know, that we love a good film festival too. And I'm just kind of wondering from a sync perspective, I mean, you know, how that works, and I guess you're going to tell us anyway what you do there and how that all works, but you know, how to connect that in for sync as a producer, finding out what film festivals are on, like who's making these film festivals, just things in general, really. But it sounds really fantastic.
When you say producer, are you a movie producer or a music producer?
Well, my background has been in film as a producer, but since COVID and a bit of a life change, I've become a music producer with the support of these beautiful people here.
Amazing. Well, there are hundreds of film festivals all around the world. There are lots of ways to just Google and find some of the most popular or largest or oldest, kind of whatever category. Some are stronger for narratives, some are stronger for documentaries, some are going to be, you know, more like horror or niche or like really interesting festivals that have very specific films that they screen. Across the board, I think very few have a strong music focus. So the ones that have music focuses have historically been some of the larger film festivals in larger major cities. And Nashville, obviously being Music City, definitely has a music focus. We have a specific music program. So similar to how South by Southwest actually has divided their festival now officially into like a music vertical, a film vertical, and a tech vertical. The Nashville Film Festival has been kind of working toward that, not as clearly defined, but we definitely have a music vertical and a film vertical. So the music vertical includes panels, showcases, lunches, events, meetups, like so many things that you can be a part of. And it's kind of the 3 days leading into the music portion. So they kind of, the film portion. The music portion is like the first 3 days, and the film is like the last 3 days. They kind of overlap on one. So they are, they're all intertwined. It's all one festival, and like your badge gets you into still the opening night party and closing night party and all the fun like film festival things. And then a couple of the music documentaries as well. So, but it is very music focused. We have, myself and one other person oversee all of the programming for the music program. And we have a committee under us and a bunch of amazing volunteers and teams that kind of help to program that. But it's everything from music supervisors that are coming in, what those panels are going to be themed and talking about, the schedule of meetups and different events and specific things that attendees can come to, showcases, and who's going to be a showcasing artist. We also have a songwriting camp that's a part of it in conjunction with that. So the supervisors are providing briefs and working with established writers and artists who are writing for specific projects. So it's pretty extensive, to say the least. But yeah, it's definitely worth coming to. the in-person experience is far greater than the virtual one. So if you are able to attend, I would highly recommend it. If not this year, in the future, definitely put it on your calendar. It's every fall, usually like end of September, October timeframe. And if not, there are so many others all around the world. I'd say typically some of the Western European cities, the larger cities, have some that have a music focus. North America obviously has a lot that has a music vertical. But yeah, I'm sure there are dozens. And if you want to like help support that, I'm sure you could reach out to your local festival, whether it's, I don't know where you are, Sydney or Melbourne or whatever, but and ask them if they can have a music supervisor come, or invite a music supervisor, or try to have a panel about music supervision. Or most common, I think, is a panel that is about a film that is premiering at the festival, where the film has a music component. It doesn't have to be a musical or a music documentary or anything, but where music is an important character, and the director, the producer, the composer, the music supervisor all might be on a panel talking about the music process as it's woven into the film in conjunction with the film premiere. So a lot of times there are panels with the leading actors or the producer and director, Q&A after the film sometimes. And so maybe the festival organizers just don't have that on their radar. So maybe it's just as simple as like shooting them an email and being like, hey, this is important, and it would be a great conversation to have if you want to reach out to some of the filmmakers and ask if anyone on their music team would like to come speak.
It's great advice. Thank you, Liz. And thank you, Joe, for that question. Liz, would you tell people the website? Because just so everybody knows, the program is outstanding. They work really hard to curate this program. I mean, last year I was just like, wow, they had some opportunities for us too. So please take a look at that. I think, is it NashvilleFilmFestival.com? There, .org. There you go.
Yeah.
Great. So it's in the chat, everybody. And for those of you watching the replay, NashvilleFilmFestival.org. You can go /VIP-badges. And please check that out and support them, because I will say, like, film festivals are a great thing to go to for a producer, film producer, musician, all of that, because it's networking, it's making friends. It's sometimes there's music supervisors, sometimes there's different artists. You can meet the other artists. If you're on a film, you meet the other artists. It's highly valuable to be in person with people like that. And something like the Nashville Film Festival, that's so reputable and so well organized and, successful year after year, that's one you want to go to, because every year they're doing well. Like, you get good reviews every single year. So yeah, highly encourage everybody to get into the Nashville Film Festival. Like I said, not this year, but hopefully next year.
Well, one of the things that I love about the Nashville Film Festival is that we are a smaller festival, which just means that you have more one-on-one opportunity. Like, you yourself have more chance to actually make a connection, meet the right person. There aren't mobs of people. There aren't swarms of press. Like, it's so much easier to actually talk to someone that is an executive, high level person with ease at a smaller festival. So, and we put on a great program. I know I'm biased, but it's so fun to work on, and so fun to see the success that comes from it and people that get placements. And so, yeah.
Congrats on that. That's huge. I mean, really, like, people don't understand. I have no idea what has to happen for that to happen, but I know you're doing a lot of work, so that's amazing. We're going to get to Gary's question. We're running out of time a little bit, so Gary, give me a second, because I have a question about production value. We talk about this, we work on this in Musicians Peer Support a lot, focusing on the craft, the songwriting, finding that genuine, authentic expression, getting the production value up, because like you said, maybe it's not the subject matter or anything like that, but you have to be at the level of up for production value. You're not going to listen to music that is subpar in terms of production value, correct?
Yeah, I think that if something is intentionally lo-fi or analog or retro, like it has to be done with such intentionality that it's not mistaken. Otherwise it needs to sound like it could be on the radio. And the production level is so much more than just like the right mix. It's also the right sounds, the right drum samples, the right, like all the things that go into building the track. It's, I think, one of the big things that I unfortunately see and hear a lot of when I speak to, like, you know, different groups and organizations is I feel like I'm saying it a lot and people are saying it a lot, but it sounds dated. And that comes across in like the sample packs that you're using or that your producers are using, something that sounds just like several years old. And not by several, I don't mean like 2-3 years old. I mean like 10 or more years old, where you can tell that that they're not in touch with what's current. And I think the hard thing for me is I don't know, like we don't know if it's a gap of you not putting in the work to really study the current artists that are on the radio, or if you are hearing those artists and saying, my music sounds like that. And so both of those are problems, but it's hard to identify which it is. So, you know, really trying to step back and, like I said, be really honest with yourself and listen to your music and really say, like, does this really sound like it could be on this playlist in between these two other songs? Like, is it really up to par? And if not, maybe it means like either doing some more work yourself or finding a new producer to collaborate with, listening to different, you know, artists, different genres, finding a way to combine that into the sound that you're creating. So yeah.
And that's regardless of genre, right? Like production value needs to be good no matter what kind of music you're making, right?
Correct. Yeah. I mean, you can hear that radio isn't just pop music, you know, there's so many types of music on the radio. So, yeah, something that is shiny and glossy and top 40 is going to feel very different than something that's grungy and gritty and on, you know, the rock kind of stations. That's why I reference Spotify. I think Spotify playlists have a much better way to kind of integrate yourself in that sense, where you can say, hey, this Spotify playlist is trending. It has millions of listeners. This is clearly a sound that's working for all of these artists. And this is where I feel like my music sits. So it could be something that's like super out there and, you know, weird trance house that like is Afrobeat and has, you know, and it's like this really interesting rhythmic thing that like doesn't feel like it would ever fit on the radio. But it's working and it's cool and a lot of people are listening to it, and, you know, aligning your music to that in that sense of like, does this fit in with this is the target, like, am I really hitting it, am I close?
And
from a production standpoint,
right, for production standpoint, same thing with something like, okay, doing you know, a violin and guitar acoustic. And okay, how am I mixing that in 2022? Can I find a reference of modern, you know, people who've released something in the last 2 years that maybe are on a film and it's a violin and a guitar? You can always find that reference to get that production value up. Thank you, Liz. So Gary, you have a question for Liz. Thanks for being here.
Hi, Liz. Hi, Rachel.
hey.
Hello.
Great to see you. Thanks for your time. I appreciate the insights and all the information. It's been great. Yeah, I hear a lot about building relationships, I guess, you know, from a lot of different perspectives. And I know from where you are, you want to find people that you can trust, that know what they're doing, that have the production down and have the songs, you know, and up with what's going on in the field. I was wondering if there's any advice as far as, you know, starting out in this, how to sort of start building a relationship or trying to reach out to like music supervisors or publishers or whatever, you know, in a way that, you know, that's not like, I know you talk about certain things that you don't want, right? You don't want people to send you, you know, the attachments and that sort of thing, but some ideas as far as, you know, good ways like conferences or any other suggestions you might have as far as that.
Effective ways to build relationships. When I started 25 years ago, they were like, build relationships. I was like, what? Now I get it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, conferences are a great thing. Any in-person event, a luncheon or a panel, There are a handful of organizations that put those on regularly. I don't know where you're based, but most major cities have some type of, whether it's academic structure or nonprofit organization or something that is bringing in music in some context. So just building relationships in person is going to come so much easier and more naturally than trying to reach out online. That said, there's so many resources like this, or like, on Clubhouse, or there are different platforms that have a lot of connection and community built in, that you can use to kind of facilitate that cold reach out, a cold intro, or just like chatting with someone kind of in a forum. I'd say if you're reaching out with an email, kind of like what I said earlier in the chat about doing your homework and really being honest with where your music aligns and where it could fit, is going to be really helpful to catch the attention of someone who gets so many emails, and get them to actually click through your link. So to say, hey, my music sounds like if this artist and this artist had a baby, and I'm the musical, brainchild of that. And it kind of has these lists a couple of things, like it feels dynamic and pulsing, and it's really high energy, or, it feels like it, and again, if you're reaching out to a specific supervisor, finding a direct correlation to why they would like or want to listen to your music. So saying, hey, based on the projects that I know you work on, based on your past work, based on your work with this show or this film, I feel like my music might be up your alley. Steering away from words like perfect or great, like great for your project, perfect for your project. You don't know what's perfect for their project. Sometimes they don't even know. So don't tell them that your music is meant for their project. Say that I think you'd really like it, or I think it aligns with some of the artists that you've used in the past, or things that are coming from your standpoint, not projecting what they're going to interpret or feel. So those are just great tips in general when talking to music people. You just come from it where you're coming from and let them ingest it the way they want to.
Yeah, don't just come at them, really educate and do the research so that there's something behind it. Thank you, Gary. And I know we're running low on time, but Liz, would you be able to stay maybe just a couple more minutes off camera after a couple of these last questions here? Do you have a few more minutes?
For sure.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Well, we do have one question in the chat here from Tobias. Does it make sense to have two different catalogs, hi-fi and lo-fi, as an artist? I mean, hi-fi, you mean like regular, like so let's say hi, he says hi-fi and lo-fi, but
is this person in the group right now?
yes, you're here,
Yeah,
Tobias, right?
I'm here. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean,
yeah.
I mean, sort of, top 50 produced. That's sort of one category, but there is also, the lo-fi, which you hear from now and then in series and so on.
Yeah. So I think maybe just the differentiating of categories, I would word differently, but I think as an artist, I think having two vast different sonic palettes is going to be challenging for branding and consistency. So you're seeing a lot of sync artists, sync songwriters create two different or multiple different artist projects that can live independently with its own name, its own sonicscape, its own little group of songs, that those all feel cohesive in and of themselves. And then you may have another project that is all this other soundscape, or a third project, and they don't have to be equally pushed or branded. Once they start taking off, you might feel like you need to put some branding or a photo behind it. But on the front end, I think creating those sonic buckets of where the songs that you're creating are ending up, especially as an artist, but also probably as a producer, because you're probably working in hundreds of different, lanes with different keywords, with different artists. But if it's you yourself as an artist and a vocalist, I think it can be really helpful to clarify, hey, this song today is going to lean toward this project and this soundscape versus this other project, and having kind of different verticals or different, folders, whatever that looks like for you.
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you. We have a question here from Devin, and then I have a couple questions to just wrap it up here. Thank you so much, Liz, for being here. If you link your Spotify and a music supervisor wants to use your cue, is the music producer expected to take the cue off Spotify? There's a lot to unpack here, Devin. Usually with music supervisors, we're not sending Spotify links. And if they do want to use the music, if it's released, we're not having to pull that off of our digital streaming platforms, right, Liz? So let's just go a little bit. Do you want to?
So
Yeah.
the short answer is, sure, it's fine to send a Spotify link. If at any point there is actual interest, you will know about it long before someone ever has an audio file of your song. So they will reach back out and say, hey, we liked this song. We want to temp it in. Can we get the files? Can we get the stems? Can we get the instrumentals? Can we get the lyrics? Whatever that looks like. If you are working with a rep, you would have already sent all of that information to the rep, and the rep would very easily have a way to get it to the client very quickly and efficiently. If you're not working with a rep and you happen to, let's say you met a supervisor at a networking event and you send them a Spotify link and you're just totally independent, they would probably still say, hey, we need the assets. So it would be on you to compile a folder that they could download that had a high resolution version of your song, like a WAV file or an AIF file. Hopefully also an instrumental file that if you are creating music, definitely have those bounced out on the first go round, so you don't have to go back to the session files to try to find and bounce it out. But you would compile that folder, send over the assets. Hopefully it would be along with an actual formal request. And so you would have a context of where the song is potentially going to be used, or at least what show, what they're looking for. And then there would be a back and forth exchange long before the song was used in an episode or a film, where you would agree to it, you would agree to terms. If you are completely independent, hopefully you have a lawyer or someone helpful to like weigh in and make sure you're not signing something that's not fair to you. But yeah, there would be something long before there's no one that's pulling songs off your Spotify or SoundCloud and putting them in TV shows.
And we shouldn't expect to see our music in TV shows without our knowledge, would we?
No, the only exception to that would be if you signed an agreement with a company to represent your music and they have the potential to put it in something without notifying you.
Gotcha.
I would be very cautious of those types of companies, but there are lots of them. And when you sign your music over to a company, they have essentially the right to do with it what they want, because they are now acting on your behalf. That's what you're signing over. And if they don't have either a good communication system or a good notifying you of when something is coming out, or even being notified by the client, then sometimes it's on them, and sometimes it's they just send off tons of music to a client of theirs, and that client just uses it and doesn't notify them, that they don't even notify you. But all of those problems I see as not efficient. I wouldn't want to work with a company that does that. So, but it is possible. And I'd be careful if you have signed your music over to companies. There are a lot of distributors now, basic platform distributors that have a checkbox when you're filling out the submission to put your single just on Spotify through, TuneCore, DistroKid, all that type of all those companies now have a checkbox button that you can check to have your songs considered for sync. And I would definitely be careful or have a lawyer look over some of those, of what the rights they have there, because they therefore can also submit your songs to different, whether it is in store. I think there's a way that they can have in playlists, like you hear music in Target or something, for example. A lot of that check mark from a distribution standpoint allows for that, but some also allows for television use without your consent as well. So I would just look into that, because we see opt-in for sync as a great opportunity, and we click it, and then our song is used and we're not actually compensated. So just be wary of some of those options.
So great. I'm so grateful for this session, Liz. We really learned a lot. But before we close out the recording, do you still play music? Do you still sing and stuff?
I lead worship at church.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's a yes. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So we can have like karaoke night or something.
I suppose.
Do you have a favorite lately, a favorite song to sing, like something that you kind of like, you find yourself humming?
I don't know. Not necessarily, when nothing comes to mind. I would say I love Hope Darst. If you haven't heard of her, she's a good one to check out.
Very cool. Thank you.
That's
a great, that's a great recommendation. Well, Liz, we'll conclude the recording for now, but if you could stick around for 3 minutes off the recording, maybe we could just do a little happy hour here for a few minutes with our lovely crew here. Everybody, please give it up for Liz Rogers. I feel very fulfilled with information and knowledge. That was amazing. Liz, so before we let you go, before we close out the recording, do you have we have our musicians peer support communities, a wide variety of indie artists, but we also have music industry vets such as yourself. We also have people who own their own production companies and music studios. So it runs the gamut from people just getting started to people who've been in the business for a very long time. Do you have any last words of wisdom, words of advice, any kind of words for the greater good of the group, greater good of the world?
Wow, so much pressure, greater good of the world. I would just say, like, be authentic to who you are and like stay true to that, and be open to pivoting in your career, in your life. Like if something is pulling you away from, you felt like you've always been this like country songwriter, but you really want to do pop, like let that lead you, and just make sure it's coming from an authentic place. I think just staying true to you.
Oh my gosh, I love that. Thank you so much. Stay true to you. Everybody, one last round of applause here for our wonderful Liz Rogers. Please check out all of her socials. Follow her, Nashville Film Festival. Everybody, please check that out. There's great opportunities there. So make sure you follow the Nashville Film Festival. Yes, the socials of the Nashville Film Festival. That's really great opportunities there. So thank you everybody for joining. Musicianspeersupport.com is our website. So please visit us there. And that'll do it, everybody. Thank you so much.